All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where we're doing some Big Ten team previews. We got Wisconsin tonight. If you're enjoying the program, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate all the support. But we're going to send it over to Cody, talk about the offensive weaknesses of the Badgers.
Weaknesses or strengths?
Strengths. Let's start with strengths.
All right. Well, we'll start with strengths. I think
talk them up first.
This team's going to be a really good floor spacing team, just kind of like they were last year. I think this is what this offense was built off. Obviously it was led by John Tonje, who became an All-American last season, and you lose like a post presence and Stephen Crowell and a guy that was around for a while, and Max Klesmet didn't really shoot it all that well last year. He's better than 29%, but he's gone now. But I think this is a really good shooting team, and I think the front court floor spacing kind of solidifies this as a great floor spacing group. Like you have Nolan Winter, who shot at 36% last year. He's going to play the center position for the most part for this roster. And Austin Rapp at the 4 shot at 35% on almost 8 attempts per game. I mean, he's pretty perimeter reliant, but his floor spacing is going to open up a lot of things for this offense. One thing to note is they did lose their top assistant coach, like I believe it was 2 weeks ago, who was like operating as the offensive coordinator and was a big reason as to why this offense got more modernized, and actually familiar faces taking over as the offensive coordinator or top assistant. And I believe it's going to be Brad Davison, who was here for a while. So, it was tough. It's tough to see that offensive guy leave. But yeah, and he was a big reason for the pace getting a little bit faster. They were 151st in pace last year after perennially being outside the top 300 under Greg Gard. And not completely sure what we see from a pace perspective, but ultimately I think the offense has got modernized enough to where he keeps a lot of that same philosophy. And, the guard group of Nick Boyd, Blackwell, and Andrew Rohde, I think provides a lot of skill, and particularly John Blackwell, who I think is potentially ready for that John Tonje like breakout. I mean, he averaged 16 points a game last year, so I don't know how much of a breakout it is, but he was one of the the least talked about guys in the nation, just because he was kind of in the shadow of Tonje. And I think they have very similar skill sets. I think, his ability to, attack and get to the rim consistently, generate free throw attempts is going to be really big. He's going to be more scoring minded. And I mean, you have arguably a better point guard presence coming in this year. And Nick Boyd, I think he's just a rock solid guard that, more perimeter reliant as a scorer, but I think he's going to be the guy that kind of makes everything go. He's going to basically have everyone in line and have guys like Andrew Rohde off the ball to hit shots. He's also a secondary creator in his own right. So I think there's some underrated skill on this roster. And I think this is a team that's going to be great in the ball security area as well. Boyd and Blackwell are sure-handed. Like, I think Andrew Rohde will throw the ball away at times, but if he's playing in more of a secondary role, I think he'll be fine in that regard. But I mean, Greg Gard teams have been top 50 nationally in turnover rate for 7 straight seasons, and they have the skill, spacing, and handling to do this again. So I think they're going to be a great offense.
Mark, any strengths to add, and then we'll dive into weaknesses.
No, just to kind of reiterate, I think this floor spacing on this team is going to be ridiculous, right? Especially with 2 bigs that can both shoot it in Winter and Rapp. So I think it'll be a fun offense to watch for sure. But kind of transitioning to weaknesses, like I don't have a ton. I guess like my main one is just I don't really know how much this team's going to get on the offensive glass. Like Nolan Winter is really the only one, 9.8% offensive rebound rate. But outside of him, like Rapp playing the 4 position, 2% offensive rebound rate guy. He kind of just hangs out at the perimeter more. And then kind of behind Winter, like I think we're going to see Winter play. He's going to have a huge jump in minutes. Last year he played just about half a game. He's going to make a huge jump this year because behind him, I think there are question marks. So that would be my main thing. And then like interior scoring, I'm a little bit questioning. Last year having Crowell down there certainly helped. But now, like, they have Winter, and then alongside him, like I mentioned, Rapp just kind of wants to hang out outside. So both of my concerns kind of come with like lack of depth in the front court.
Cody, anything to add? Areas of concern?
Yeah, I think the interior scoring depth is a concern. I mean, I think Nolan Winter's kind of due for a leap as like a post up creator, kind of. Like to be honest, I just think he's a potential like breakout star within this offense. And he was in the 99th percentile in post up efficiency last season. It was low volume, like it wasn't. I don't know exactly how many possessions it is, but it was pretty low volume, and I don't know if he'll be able to deal with Big Ten fives every night. He was posting up fours for the most part, and with Crowell on the floor. So, it's going to be a little bit harder for him to get buckets inside consistently. I mentioned Rapp as a perimeter reliant four. Like, he's not a guy that is really going to get downhill and do all that much there. But ultimately, I think this problem will be solved just with the floor spacing, opening up lanes, and opening up cutters to score at the rim. Like, I don't think this was a phenomenal rim scoring offense last year, but they finished 43rd nationally in 2-point percentage. So I think it was just the spacing and, the frequency of taking threes. Just, you have to honor that perimeter offense. It's going to open up some things at the cup.
All right, we're going to transition into defensive strengths now. And Cody, I'll have you kick us off, actually.
Yeah, the strength, really, as always with Greg Gard defenses, is their transition defense. It's always an emphasis, and I think they kind of get back to that and are even better this year than they were last year. They played a little bit faster with the different offense, the more modernized offense. But I do think the pace of this offense gets sort of back to like near the 300s in adjusted tempo as opposed to like 150. But they were still 8th percentile in transition frequency allowed last season, and they were just in the 38th percentile in efficiency when guarding it. But it's about limiting the opportunities. That's more important. Like, this isn't an athletic roster by any means, so they're going to struggle when teams are able to get out and run. But it's the fact that they're able to limit those opportunities. It's going to give this defense a high floor. They're always going to defensive rebound. I think they're going to do that well again. This is a Greg Gard staple as well. They're top 50 in defensive rebound rate in 4 straight seasons. And like I mentioned, this team has a high floor because of these characteristics. He never necessarily has elite talents on this end of the floor, but his teams control the controllables. They cut off catch and shoot 3-point opportunities. Like, it's mostly drop coverage defensively. They play straight up in the post. They don't post trap and force their defense into rotation. Like, they kind of just take their licks on the ball, and ultimately it's the right way to go from an effective field goal percentage perspective. And I think that's what Greg Gard's looking for.
Marcus, anything to add here?
Yeah, one thing to add, and it will actually like kind of lead into a weakness I have. They do a great job also of like playing defense without fouling. They're very disciplined on this end of the floor, right? Like, you look at Nolan Winter last year, and over half a game, he was only averaging 1.6 fouls per game. Austin Rapp, another guy that, he's playing 33 minutes a game. Obviously not at Wisconsin, but it's going to translate well because he was only averaging 2.6 fouls a game. And then as a whole, I think, it's just a point of emphasis, right? Of, playing discipline, not, gambling a lot, not being, not trying to do too much, which leads me into a weakness of theirs. Like, they're not going to force turnovers. We know that just based on, what we've seen in Greg Gard defenses, right? I mean, his best finish since 2016 is 111th in turnover rate defense. And last year they were 331st in turnover rate defense, which is his worst. But typically living in that like 150 to 250 range. So I think we're going to kind of see that again. But I think it's just kind of a style thing. Obviously, and they have good defenses that really, really emphasize like holding teams to a low percentage shooting, just contesting shots and then playing discipline and defensive rebounding, limiting teams to one shot, which, like you said, that's something they're going to do well again. One other concern I have, I don't know. I question the rim protection, in particular the rim protection depth. Like Nolan Winter isn't like a fantastic rim protector. Like I think style can kind of mask a little bit of this. Austin Rapp, I don't really love as a rim protector. And as we touched on the offensive end, like they're not an overly deep team in the front court. So I have a pretty big concern here with the rim protection as a whole. So I think those would be my two main concerns with this defense. But like Greg Gard defenses are good pretty much always, and they emphasize, like I said, discipline. Keeping guys in front, limiting them to one shot, and I wouldn't expect anything different here.
Any concerns you want to add, Cody?
Yeah, I mean the center depth was my concern. Like I wouldn't even consider Nolan Winter like a traditional center, and I'm not really sure what they're getting out of some guys. Like their Lithuanian big man. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, to be honest with you, Alexis Bialauskis. I think that's pretty close. I think I did a pretty good
Better
job
than
there.
what I could do.
But
that was pretty good.
Then you have Elijah Gray, who's not really sure if he's a true center or not, and then the 3-star Will Garlock, who I'm not sure is going to play much of a role. 7-footer. At least you can throw a body out there, which could be, probably the best thing you can do, because you're not going to play Austin Rapp as the backup 5. It's just not something you can do in a drop defense. So yeah, that's concerning for me from a rim protection perspective, because a lot of he filters a lot of offenses into the paint, and in the mid-range area specifically is where he wants teams to take shots. But you can kind of go at this front court, which leads to some concerns. I'm never going to sound the alarms on a Greg Gard defense. Like 2 years ago, I think they weren't the greatest defense, and they finished 59th nationally, which that's not enough to win the Big Ten or go deep into a tournament, but it still makes you a pretty good team. Like that was a team that finished 25th in Torvik's final ratings, so it's still a pretty good team. It's just, as always with Greg Gard, super high floor, and the ceiling's kind of it's kind of dependent on how good the offense is and how talented they are. And I think they have a pretty good group.
All right, we're gonna switch paces a little bit here. Who's the MVP and who's the X factor? Marcus, let's go with you.
Yeah, MVP. I went with John Blackwell. I think he's going to be really important as their primary shot maker. Like Cody mentioned earlier, I think really due for a breakout. I think he can also, I think he's going to shoot the 3 ball a bit better than he did last year. He didn't shoot it overly fantastic, 32%. But his freshman year shot it at 45.5% on much lower volume. But I think he's going to get that number up a little bit. And I think he's in store for a big season with plenty of opportunity now with Tonje gone. X factor, I went with Nolan Winter. I think he could end up being their MVP very easily. I was back and forth here, and ultimately I went with him as their X factor because he's only ever played as much as half a game. So I just want to see him do it for longer in a game. I want to see kind of how he is as a post hub, like we talked about. But I think the talent is there. I think he has certainly the ability to be the MVP for this team.
Cody, did you go a different direction, or who's your MVP? Who's your X factor?
Yeah, I went with the same 2 guys, Blackwell and Winter. I think pretty much a no-brainer with Blackwell. I just think he's due to take that John Tonje leap. They have very similar profiles, and yeah, I do think Blackwell's in store for a better shooting season. I think he's a better shooting talent than his 32% number says. And yeah, I think Nolan Winter is the X factor of this team. I think mostly for his defensive responsibility, but I think there's real pick and pop upside with him. There's real upside for him to, be really efficient in the post with more volume. So yeah, I think he's a really versatile piece for this team that can he's going to unlock more on the offensive end, but I think he's more of a swing piece defensively, mostly just because they need him from a rim protection stance.
What's your ceiling? What's your floor, Marcus? Let's hear it from you.
Yeah. Ceiling, I said they could finish third in this league. I think the offense is good enough where they could, I think they're really going to shoot the ball quite well. If Nolan Winter can make that leap too as more of a post hub, to help the interior scoring, that would certainly help their ceiling as well. Floor, I went ninth, and this just being like my concerns with the interior depth, the rim protection concerns. I think other than that, this is a really solid team. I'd be pretty surprised if they fell to that floor.
And do you have bold prediction, Marcus, for the season?
Yeah. So it's a 3-point stat here. I think Wisconsin finishes in the top 10 in the country in 3-point attempts per game. Last year, they were 26th at 28.4 attempts. And they were actually top 20 they were 27th in 3-point makes. So I think they get to the top 10 in attempts and top 20 in makes per game.
All right, Cody, what's your ceiling? What's your floor for the Wisconsin Badgers?
Yeah, I have the same ceiling and the same floor. I mean, we've been pretty in line with those, honestly. I had them top 3. I think they can be a 4 seed in the tournament, and then ninth in the Big Ten, which is still a really good team. And I think they can still be a 9 or 10 seed at that mark. So I think they're, like I mentioned, super high floor. It's just the ceiling is dependent on a few things. But my bold prediction is I think John Blackwell and Nolan Winter make Big Ten first or second teams. I think they both find their way onto one of those. I don't know if the Big Ten does 10 players for the first team or not, but I think that's just a crime in general for leagues that do that. But yeah, it's just I don't love it. But either way, I think they make a first or second team. And I think Wisconsin stays in the top 25 all season. If they don't, I mean, I'll look pretty bad if they don't even make the preseason top 25. But I have the first rendition of the top 25 after games are played. They'll be in it, and they'll stay in it all season.
All right, I like it. All right, we're going to wrap things up here. As always, thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.